Welcome to the Mighty Oaks Show. I'm Jeremy Stoliker, the Executive Director of the Mighty Oaks Foundation. And I'm here today with John Davis. John, among other things, serves with us here at the Mighty Oaks Foundation, handles all of our application processing. So when someone applies online, John gets that application and then works to get them in a program. Teaches in our program, serves as a team leader, and in a lot of other capacities. But John, in addition to what he's doing now, has a pretty broad background of experience, a lot of stuff that you've done in your life. And one of the areas that the Mighty Oaks Foundation is working now, we started exclusively as a veterans organization, working with veterans. Started working with those who are active duty, and we've had a lot of success there, and thankful for that. We have our spouses programs that now spouses are included in our programs, whether it's on the women's side or the men's side. And thankful for all that has happened there and transpired there. But one of the areas we've started to move into is that of working with first responders. And this is an interesting area for us. And it's something that for a long time we stayed away from, believing, I guess, that trauma may be different from one community to another. And understanding that a lot of the things that our veterans and active duty service members are dealing with, the first responders community is dealing with as well. And we're still a veterans organization, still dealing with, of course, the issues surrounding veterans causes and those things. But more and more, we're trying to figure out how we can support the first responder community. So part of your background, you were in the Army. Not everyone can be a Marine, but you were in the Army and served our country honorably. You're in Panama and a number of other things in your Army career. And then became a police officer. So you have the veteran side and had served as a police officer as well, and retired from the Whittier Police Department.
Correct.
And are now working with us. And you do other things in terms of training for sports teams and a lot of other things that you're involved in. But your background is such that you have been a tremendous blessing in this area of helping us navigate this first responders area. And so what I want to talk about today with you, and we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, as time goes on, is that specific area. Is that of first responders? And first responders, we're talking about firefighters, police officers, EMTs, anyone in that first responders world, right? And we have, I guess, folks from all over the first responders world that we work with. But you've helped us navigate a lot of that. We're still trying to figure out the best way to do that. But as I mentioned, a lot of what we've come to understand is that veterans issues and the things veterans are dealing with and active duty service members are dealing with and the traumas they've experienced are shared by first responders. If you will, take some time to talk about some of the similarities and then some of the differences. And I think there's a lot on both sides of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there is a lot of similarities. And when I went through the program and I heard the veterans, most of my, I guess you could say, trauma was in law enforcement, the first responder. Desert Storm in Panama was a little bit different. You saw a little bit, but it was much different than post 9/11 combat for sure.
Right.
So the things I saw as a police officer, I didn't even equate that with that of like the combat veterans of post 9/11.
Completely different to you.
I thought it was totally different.
Yeah.
Like I was very, very hesitant about going to a legacy program to begin with.
Yeah.
I was encouraged by my wife, and I went, and I'm glad I did, obviously.
Yeah.
But once I heard those guys and heard what they were going through, especially on the inside, I definitely felt like, man, there's a lot of similarities, and I felt that from the very beginning. I felt like, man, police officers need this because what these guys are dealing with from combat is very similar to what I went through in my time, besides my shootings, the things I saw on a regular basis as a police officer, and then some of the more traumatic things that I experienced, and the after effects and the things, how we dealt with it was very similar to veterans.
Right.
What was going on in their personal lives, what they were choosing to cope with that trauma was very, very similar. And I didn't think there was a big, huge difference as far as the effects and the feelings and emotions and the things that go on inside.
What are some of those things?
Some of those things.
Some of the emotions, some of the feelings, some of the coping kind of mechanisms.
Well, the coping mechanism, the common ones we talk about all the time is, guys turn to alcohol. We used to call it Friday night lights, and that would be at the end of the shift. You'd meet, and guys would just drink. The deal with it, instead of getting together and talking about, what happened. The little kid that you saw killed in a car accident, or someone murdered or raped or whatever it is you see as a police officer. We just get together and laugh about it and drink. You know,
Right.
I wasn't a big drinker. That wasn't a personal problem,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
would think I was rare in that case. I'd get together with them and talk about them and hang out. But that was obviously one of the big coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
And then the other one that we're really good at, and especially police officers and first responders, is pushing it down, shoving it down, and not just part of it, and hardening up on the outside while on the
Yeah.
inside you're really, really hurting.
Yeah. And just pretending like it didn't happen,
Yeah,
going on with your job.
it's what you're supposed to see. It's part of it. Yeah.
One of our friends comes from the first responder community. He was one of the first responders that came to our program, Dusty.
Oh yeah.
And
That's a great guy.
Dusty's awesome.
Yeah.
But he had served on the national response teams and went to the Oklahoma City bombing, 9/11, and Dusty's going to come on the show and talk about that someday, and I'm excited about that. But I remember talking to him and him, very hesitant about coming to our program, dealing with some of his own things, very hesitant about coming to the program. Came and said the same thing. As I was listening to the veterans talk about all the stuff they've been through, I realized maybe I haven't been in that kind of combat, but I've been in combat. The things I've seen and the things I've dealt with and how we process it and how we deal with it. It's crazy. But there are differences too.
Sure.
And there's a camaraderie between the veterans. I speak in the context of our program, but I think veterans and law enforcement folks and first responders, they just have a camaraderie, even when they, maybe outside of our program. But there is a difference. Kind of talk about the difference a little bit, because I think it's an important distinction between the two.
I think one of the big difference, probably the biggest difference that I see is that, a 19, 20-year-old guy or whatever age, he goes to combat, and he goes one way and he sees this stuff for 6 months, a year, whatever it is, and he comes back and there's sometimes, a lot of times, a significant difference. They know it, the people around them know it. They even know it, and they
You mean personally they've changed?
Personally,
yeah,
they've changed.
Right.
It's like, man, you come back a different person.
Yeah.
As a first responder, I mean, you don't see that because it's we've talked about it and we've used this term like a slow drip. You don't really see these changes because they're small changes. I mean, you go to work and you could work a whole shift and stop a few cars, go to some calls, nothing crazy. Then you can go to shift and you can be running and maybe gunning a little bit in a sense, the whole shift, and then the next day it could be different. But the changes are slowly in your personal life and what you see and how you change as a person. There's definitely a change, but it's a very slow process.
Right.
And for me personally speaking, I started one way, who I was in a sense, where I was, my priorities in life, and then 5, 6 years later, I woke up and I was like, I had no idea how I became that man, and what was going on inside me, and the thoughts and the heart attitude.
Right.
Yeah.
I think even the ability then to deal with that when you come back from a combat deployment, you've now left the scene of trauma. You've left where the problems took place and where the issues you dealt with, where all that happened. You've left that. You've come home, and so there's a very distinct break in what happened and what's going on now. And a lot of people struggle with that, and that's what we do every day. And I know that. But for the first responder community, and that doesn't happen. It's you're going to get back out there tomorrow, and you deal with something extremely traumatic in the morning, but because you're a police officer or a firefighter or whatever the case, you're in the community. Now you're doing some kind of a community event in the afternoon. You see a child perhaps, hurt or killed in the morning. You go home to your kids in the evening. That's something that even in the veteran community, we don't have to deal with.
I know, like when you say that, I instantly thought about a story, an incident that happened to me because I was working. It was a Friday night. I worked all night, and the next day I was coaching my kids. And I remember being on the sidelines during the game, and we were doing well, and the kids were cheering, and the parents were cheering. And as I sat there, I just had this thought, like almost out of body, like if these people knew what I did last night, I don't even remember what I did. I'm sure it was something, fights or whatever it was. If they knew what I was or that person I was that night before, would they let me coach their kids? Because I'm thinking in my head, I wouldn't. That was a different, violent man. And now I'm here on the sidelines coaching these kids, trying to make 8, 9-year-old kids, and that bringing those together and reconcile that in your mind is really tough because you see things and how you are, so you can survive as a police officer. You're deployed every day you go to work. You have to be. I mean, that's number one, officer safety. And
Right.
what does that mean? It means you got to be on alert. Every time you stop a car, this guy's going to get out with an AK and start shooting me. He's going to run. He's going to do this. Every time you walk up to the door, you know, you got to prepare yourself. So you're always in that mindset. And then you have to turn it off and go home and be a loving husband and
Sure.
a father.
Yeah, yeah. And you never really turn it off, right? I mean,
Right.
when I come home or came home from a deployment, as Marines, you know, per our uniform regulations, we weren't even supposed to wear our uniforms to the grocery store or whatever, right? But police officers, they carry their guns, they carry their badges. Why? Because they're always on. So you're never off. I know in the firefighter community, you know, they're always on.
Mhm.
They have days off, but they can be called back if something happens. We've had, you know, crazy rains here recently, and that's caused some problems. And those guys are working 24/7 until the issue is dealt with. The fires here, those guys working, I mean, massive hours. They're working all of the time. They never get to turn it off.
Right.
And that has a real impact.
Absolutely.
There's the isolation part too, which I think is interesting in the law enforcement community, particularly. I think probably throughout the first responder community, but particularly for law enforcement folks, there seems to be a real isolation. You go through these things, you deal with these things, but who do you talk to about them? And that's where the drinking happens and the rest of it, right?
Right. Yeah. And I initially, like I said, I was involved in church when I first started as a law enforcement, teaching a Bible study. I was plugged in. I had people I could talk to.
Yeah.
But then you slowly drift away from those people, and you feel like you can't. They won't understand you. They don't know what's going on inside me. There's no way they could get what I saw. I can't talk to them, including your spouse. So you isolate yourself slowly over time, and then you just shove it down and go home, and you know you're this other person, and that's true. I mean, I love being a dad.
Yeah.
I like being married.
Right.
I loved coaching, but I felt literally like a different person at work and then at home too.
Yeah. So how do you, and this is something we talk about a lot, how do you move forward when you're deploying every day? As you said, you deploy every day. How do you move forward? What steps do you take? And again, this is interesting because when I'm talking to a veteran, someone who has served, they've experienced some things in their life, they've come home, probably made some bad decisions most of the time by the time they get to us.
Yeah.
But there's some very clear, there's substance abuse, there are relationship issues, some bad decisions that have been made there, some other things that have happened, maybe some financial issues. And when we're laying out a plan, we can say, look, in order to move forward, you need to separate yourself from what happened in the past. You know, it's part of who you are, but it shouldn't define you anymore. It's part of your history, but it's not who you are right now. You need to deal with this alcoholism or drug addiction. You need to get some help in your relationship. You need to do this and this and this. But they can focus on those things because the trauma's gone.
Right.
They're not going back to work tomorrow to deal with it again. So as a police officer, and maybe this is you looking back, but how do you move forward? A firefighter, how do you move forward every day when you're still in the middle of that mess every day?
I mean, you asked me that before we started, and
Yeah.
man, that is a very tough question. I mean, I could give you some basic answers of, the foundation of what we teach guys. Stay in the Word of God, stay in prayer, stay with your brothers. 3 things that I did not do for sure. I was initially involved in church. The other thing, stay in fellowship. I failed in all 4 of those areas. So starting off those foundational things, absolutely, that's where it starts.
Yeah. Say those again. The 4 things.
Staying in prayer,
In prayer.
being in the Word of God.
Right.
Being with your brothers, someone you can talk to, someone who's walking that same path as you, wants to be the same man as you, wants to be the same husband, not the buddy at work who's going in a different direction. We talk about what true brotherhood is all the time with the program, and finding somebody like that, someone who's going to call you out and say, look, idiot, what are you doing?
Right. This is not okay.
This is not okay.
Yeah.
You're making a bad decision.
Yeah.
And then finally being in fellowship, being in church. And all 4 of those things I had initially, all 4 of those things I failed on. So starting right there, I mean, we could just keep it basic. That would be the foundation.
Because as those things drop off, you start to
and
make
we
bad
see it all the
decisions,
time.
right?
All the guys, whether veterans or first responders, they go back, they fall on their face, and we ask them those questions. And most of the time, all 4 of them, they failed to do. Well, why do you think you're in that place? So starting there, that would be the very most important. Obviously, your relationship with your wife, if you're married, is hugely important. I mean, we think, and they can't understand they can't understand like what we felt when we're out there on this call and seeing a dead kid or the trauma you see at work.
Nor should we expect them to understand.
Good point. Very
Right.
good point. Very good point. But we should share at least what we saw,
Sure.
you know, and then reach out to our brothers, and man, that jacked me up, you know,
Yeah.
and being man enough. And that's a manly thing. It's like and that's a big thing with first responders and cops and firemen. It's like, man, I can't show it. That's weakness. You know, now at my age now, being 50, I think much differently. When I hear that at the program, I tell guys like, man, I respect you. That's strength as a man.
Right.
And you could admit, man, that
Right.
bothered me. That's not weakness.
Yeah.
That bothered me seeing someone hurt, you know, and you know, whatever the situation is, and saying that affected me, that means you're a person. That doesn't lose respect. That doesn't mean you're weak.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, if a guy puts a gun in your face, are you gonna do what you need to do? Yeah, I am. Okay, well, you're all right.
Yeah.
You know?
We use the analogy to, again, in the veteran world, if you call for fire support, you're in a bad combat situation, you call for fire support and you do it right and support gets there, you're a hero for that, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're on a call somewhere and things are going sideways and you can call for support, you call for backup, that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Why do we not think it's the same in our lives?
No.
Yeah, we fail to ask for help.
Yeah. I mean, that's just with men in general.
Right.
And it's just worse in the communities that we're in,
Yeah.
for sure.
You know my son, you know my whole family, but my son, getting ready to graduate from high school. He's wanted to be a police officer, you know, his whole life, and that's what he wants to do. And you're helping him kind of do that, and he's doing some stuff to get ready for that. On the other side of all of this, how would you prepare someone? You know, and you've talked to him a lot, and I've appreciated it, and we've had a lot of conversations. I think he's more prepared probably because of that.
Good.
But what do you tell a young person or someone who's on the front of this, into this, or someone who's still excited about being a cop because things haven't gone sideways for them yet? Or firefighters. I talk to firefighters all of the time who are dealing with the same stuff. You know, I don't know how it is everywhere, but I know here in California, those folks are running from call to call to call to call, and then dealing with wildfires that they're deployed away from their homes for, you know, sometimes months at a time. CAL FIRE is an organization here. Those folks are, I mean, they're working all the time, dealing with craziness all the time. What would you tell someone, we talk about resiliency, what would you tell someone on the front end of that to be prepared for some of that?
Well, I would tell them the same thing I told my stepson, Garrett,
Yeah.
who's getting ready to join the Navy.
Yeah.
The same exact thing for those guys is that when you do that, and there's going to have an effect on your life. You will not be the same person.
Sure. There will be an impact.
There will be an impact on your life. When you see those things, and whether it's a veteran and
Sure.
whatever level, if you go to combat or not, there's going to be a change.
Yeah.
As a first responder, you're going to see some things without a doubt. Those things are going to make you better or worse. You will not stay the same. You're going to be a much, much better man. Your perspective is going to be different. Your appreciation for life. And I was sharing this with Garrett last night. I was like, man, when I walk around today, I am so happy and have so much joy because I'm still breathing. You know, and I saw what I saw, and I looked back at it with perspective, like, man, I could have gone down such a dark road, you know, and I did for a while, but I changed course, you know, and now I appreciate life, you know, or you can make the choice that we see so many guys make, you know, and they cope on ways that are negative to their life and their family. So one way or the other, you're going to be much, much better or much, much worse. But it's a choice you're going to have to make, and you're going to have a plan for that. You're going to have to go into that understanding that, not thinking this won't affect me. And Garrett actually said this to me. It's, I think I'm ready for it. I'm like, no.
You have no idea.
You have no idea.
Yeah.
You know, your buddy gets his arm blown off, and you got to put it back on, and he breathes his last breath. And this is what I said to him. That's going to have an effect on you. You know, and what that effect's going to be and the outcome is really on the choices you make and the priorities in your life and how you set your life up. And if it's not set up for those things, preparing for those things, and for us and what I believe and what we believe as an organization, that starts with our relationship with God. It starts with being in the Word. It starts being with in prayer. If you're doing those things, you're going to be much better. And if you're not, there's a good chance that you're going to go the other road that you see so many guys take.
And a lot of that too, those four things, you know, knowing that you need to do these before you get into trouble. It's hard. It's hard on the back end, but a lot of those things are about the right perspective. Is, you know, again, those in the military identify so much with their uniform, with their job, with what they've done. The first responder community, I mean, that's it. If I ask a cop, you know, what are you? I'm a cop. You know, I'm not a dad. I'm not a husband. I am also those things. I'm a cop first, a firefighter. You know, what are you? I'm a firefighter, or I'm a paramedic, right? I'm that, and I think it's separating yourself from what you do
Sure.
and understanding that that's a job that you do, but who you are is someone who is in the Word and is in prayer and is in fellowship and is in communion with others.
Yeah. And when you're saying that too is like we're in this fight, whether it's,
Yeah.
combat,
Yeah. Yep.
first responder, whatever.
Yeah.
But remember really what's the most important fight? What's the most important fight? Our relation with God, our families. And if you ask them, if you would have asked me, I would have said, yeah, my family, my wife, my kids, that's most important. But my life didn't reflect that. So that's not truth. Your life is going to reflect really what's inside you,
Yeah.
and you got to remember that. Like, what is the most important fight? Every day you got to wake up and remember that. I'm not, yeah, obviously you have officer safety, how you conduct yourself at work, but again, what's the most important thing?
Right.
Is it my wife? Is it my kids? Is it, those things? If it is, then again, what you do and how you live your life outside of that is going to reflect that.
What would that look like? I mean, everyone says that their wife and kids are the most important thing to them. I've had these conversations a bunch of times. You have too. And it's like, well, if that's true, then you wouldn't be where you are, right?
Right.
So what is a life that is working for the city or the county or the state, but trying to be a husband and a father? What does that priority look like? Like on a daily basis, what does that practically look like for someone?
Man, on a daily basis, that is a really tough thing for first responders when you talk about their schedules and the swing shifts and shift work you work. So that is tough. You definitely got to have a plan for that. But, it comes down to obviously communicating with your wife,
Yeah.
spending some time with them, like literally time, not just quality, but quantity time as well, talking about what's going on.
Using the time that you do have off, that you have at home.
Being
taking
extremely
advantage of that.
intentional. I mean,
Yeah.
we waste a lot of times. We have a class margin. Right?
Yeah.
The first class I taught, I'm like, what is this margin stuff?
Yeah.
I was just like,
Right.
but teaching that class made me realize, man, how much time did I waste early on? If I would have invested that wasted time on watching TV, doing the different things that we do, if I would invest that time into my family,
Yeah.
what difference could that make? And you have the time. I mean, you work a lot, but you have time off.
Right.
You have to be extremely intentional,
Yeah.
right, with that time
Right.
and what you do with that time.
Right.
And if you do, and you understand what the fight is and what you're fighting for, you're gonna make those decisions. And what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be different from everybody, but obviously it starts off with some serious time with you and your wife, sometimes with your kids. And I poured into my kids, like I coached them, but man, did I talk to them? Did I tell them about life? Did I really show them how I felt about them? Now,
Yeah.
I love you. I spend some time with you, but did I
Yeah.
tell them that? Did I spend some quality time? Did I take them out just at the park and just talk to them? Those are the things I think sometimes I know I failed in,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of guys do that as well. It's like, man, I work, I provide for them, I'm
Right.
there for them, I
Right.
protect the family. It's like, well, that's great, but there's a lot more to it than that.
I think your family too is generally pretty gracious when they know that dad has to work, and this is the kind of work that he does, and we're proud of him. But when he's home, instead of sitting on the couch drinking, doing whatever he does,
Yeah.
he's going to spend time with us. He's going to take care of us. I think there's a lot of grace when that's the relationship. It seems like when it goes sideways is when it's dad works a lot and we're really proud of him, and then he comes home and he completely checks out.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of guys, unfortunately.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Hope is something that we talk about often as well. And again, this is a very important issue to talk about in our first responders community. A lot has been written about this recently. Articles, studies, a lot's been done on this. And the tragedy of it is we are familiar with the 22 veterans a day that take their lives. We're familiar with that because it's been pretty publicly put out there, and people talk about it. There's organizations dedicated to it. Whatever the real number is, that's 22 is a number we know, right?
Yeah.
But we're told, and the reporting is weird, but we're told that in the first responder community, the deaths by suicide are probably pretty close to that number. 2018, more police officers were killed by their own hand than because of their work. Firefighter community is very, very much the same. When you're doing that job all the time, you're in it all the time, you're dealing with the worst of humanity. You become a firefighter so that you can fight fires. But what you do most of the time is deal with the worst that a city has to offer. You become a police officer because generally, I think, probably not always, but generally, you care about people, you want to serve the community, you want to do something important, but what you end up doing is dealing with the worst that a city has to offer. In the middle of all of that, it's easy to lose hope. So how do you maintain hope when every day you're dealing with the worst that society and the community has to offer?
Man, that's tough. And I thought about this. I think looking back, and I'll use my experience. When I started, the hope was there, but my mentality and what the important fight was there as well. So when I went to work, it wasn't just to arrest bad guy. I love doing that.
Yeah, sure.
For sure. I love doing that.
Yeah.
I love when guys ran from me.
Right, right.
I usually say thank you, but thinking real. But I took opportunities to talk to kids. I talked to people. I talked to wives that were beaten by their husbands. I got to talk to a lady who lost her husband after like 60 years of marriage.
Wow.
And spending time with them. And there was a lot of things I got to, help and share and give back. There was a lot of incidents like that. When I look back, yeah, there's some traumatic things, but also there's some things that, man, like you talked about hope and doing that and talking to somebody and just, caring for people and, there's so many instances like that, and there's so many good people out there. And I say this too, like being in the worst areas of the best, it doesn't matter. People are people. I mean, there's some great people and some really bad people in those in the different communities.
It doesn't matter the neighborhood.
It doesn't matter the neighborhood. And when you get to help those people, and that's what you really do that, whether it's a firefighter or a police officer, there's times when you really get to help people, and change their lives and taking that extra step. And I took those extra steps early on, to really make sure they're okay, get them resources to help them out in their life, whatever it is. And we have a lot of those resources we could help with people. When that kind of changed, and it changed over time as my heart grew a little bit darker, I didn't care. I went to call, I handled my call and did my thing. And I really, there wasn't a lot. I would still do my job, but the insides were different and I didn't care. And I didn't take those extra steps to really talk to these people.
How do you maintain that though? The kind of the soft heart versus the just cold, cynical, I'm gonna do my job, move on.
I think it goes back to what we talked about already is really staying with your foundation of who you are and who you want to be, and making sure that's at the forefront of your mind every day. Starting your day in prayer and God, this is what I want to do today when I go to work. I want to impact someone's life. Keep me safe, help me arrest bad guys, but really keep yourself, help me change somebody's life. Because you have such an opportunity. That power trip that police officers have, man, that power also could be used for so much good. Because people listen, you can talk to anybody. It's so easy to talk to people as a police officer, and you have that ability to go up to and give somebody hope by just saying something nice, like, just talking to them. Just, it blows their mind. But it starts with your attitude and where you're at and your mindset and your heart and your family and taking care of those things. If you take care of those things, then you can go to work, with the right attitude. And there's opportunities around there to help those people, and that gives you hope. When you help somebody, when I sat there and I talked to that lady, I sat with her for, I don't know, 3-4 hours.
The lady who lost her husband?
And he was laying there in front of us and she's talking to me and telling me all about him. And I was like, man, I just sat there and listened to her. I didn't say nothing. Smart, right?
Just talked.
Just listened.
Or listened,
to her, And I know it made a world of difference for her. And that was an impact I made. And I left there, like sad for her, but also it's like, man, I did my job. I served my community that day.
Help her.
And you have those opportunities all the time. It's if you take advantage of them and you go home, it's like, I saw some stuff, but man, I helped one person there. I changed one person's life. That's hope. That's hope right there for sure. And then you go home and you're the man you want to be. You go home and, you talk to your wife, you love your wife, you talk to your kids and, using some discretion, tell them what's going on, at work and give them perspective by what you do.
Don't lose sight of who you are. Understand why you got into it. Be reminded. And that's really tied to being around the right people and having a relationship with God that keeps you, kind of eyes up instead of down on all this stuff, right? And continue to move forward. That's awesome. So I asked Brandon this same question about veterans. So I'll ask you about police officers, first responders, not just police officers, all first responders. If there's a man or woman, someone who serves their community and they're having a really hard time right now, maybe they've lost hope or they've become cynical or they don't know what to do now or what to do next or they're overwhelmed by it all. They happen to be watching our show. What would you tell them? What would be the one thing you say? They're sitting right here. They're sitting across from us, and you look them in the face and say, "What would you say?"
Well, I would say to them, where you are today, you have the choice and the ability and the strength to change that without a doubt.
Yeah.
Don't use it as an excuse like, I can't change. This is who I am. It's a choice.
Yep.
Absolutely, it's a choice. It's a choice to stay there in that isolated, dark place, or they can make that choice to use those things that we talked about to make you a better person. You're choosing right now to let these things bring you down. You're coping with it the way you are. You're isolating yourself. That's a choice you've made. You can make the choice right now to change. And walking through that process, obviously we're here to help them out.
Yeah.
But there's resources out there you can find.
Right.
That's not an excuse. There's no excuses out there. You got to make a choice. And it's very tough and it's very hard.
Right.
It's really difficult to make that. There's no denying that. But you still have the choice. And those things and the hope would be in the fact that those things that have eaten you up and brought into the place they're at right now could be those things that push you forward.
Sure.
Right? To make you a better man.
Sure.
And that's in a sense how I live today. Those things that took me down and caused me the trauma in my life, those are the things I use every day to push me forward and to give me hope and to make me go forward to help other men that I get to do. And every day I get to help a man, it doesn't, and we say this a lot, it doesn't take away the past mistakes.
Sure, of course.
It absolutely doesn't.
Of course.
But it gives it some meaning. And if I could help one guy alter that course, it's worth it. It's worth it. And that person and the person who's struggling with it and the person you asked about, they have that ability too.
Yeah.
To really help people.
As dark as it may be, as difficult as it may seem, as overwhelming at work or at home, there is hope, but you have to make a decision to take the next step, to find the people who can help you and to navigate your way out of that.
Yeah. And I guess the only thing I'd add to that is that's not a weakness. Admitting you need some help. It is absolutely not a weakness.
Right.
It's a strength, and a strength that I respect. Every time a guy gets up and tells us what he's hurting with, I'm like, brother, man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I gain so much more respect opposed to just, I'm good. No, you're not.
Yeah.
No, you're not.
Yeah. To be afraid to tell people what's going on. I mean, I won't call it cowardice, but you're afraid.
You're afraid.
It takes real boldness and bravery, courage to tell someone I'm going through something, I'm hurting. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And I want to move forward. That's awesome. There is hope, and I'm really glad that we get to be a part of it. And we're trying to navigate this thing, but we're here for anyone that needs help figuring it out. So it's
absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for watching. We'll do this again next week, every Friday morning at 10 o'clock on YouTube. We get a new episode out, so stay tuned. If you haven't already, subscribe. You need to like the show. That helps us out. Share the show out. A lot of folks need to hear episodes like this one. If you know someone, a first responder, police officer, firefighter, paramedic, EMT, whatever the case, you know someone that may be struggling with some of this, get this out to them. Yeah. And we do this for one reason, because we want to help folks. And this allows them to do that. So subscribe, like it, share it, hit that bell. It'll notify you when a new episode comes online. And we look forward to the next time we're together.